You know what everyone wants? It's justice. Everyone wants that's what's fair. And when they feel they aren't getting justice, when they feel that they're not getting what's fair, what's due to them, they say, that's not fair. Have you ever said that? Well, that's what we're going to deal with in our text today. So, again, Paul has now backed up. At the beginning of chapter 5, he said, therefore, having been justified by faith. So, when you put your faith in Christ, when you are declared righteous by your faith in Christ and have the very righteousness of God upon you because you've cast your life, submitted your life to Christ, living by faith in him. When you've done this, he says, having been justified by faith, you have peace with God. You have access. You're no longer hopeless. You're no longer joyless. And we said those are all the materials that build our house. But our house has to have a solid foundation. So here, as we will see today, and as we've been seeing in the last few devotionals, Paul goes back to that foundation. And that foundation is what our justification or being declared righteous is built upon. But before he does that, he has to deal with our condemnation. What is the reason that everyone is born into this world condemned before they even sin themselves? And that's what he's been dealing with. We saw Romans chapter 12. Here it is. Therefore, just as one man sin entered the world and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sin. For until the law, sin was in the world, but sin is not imputed where there is no law. Nevertheless, death reigned from Adam to Moses, even over those who had not sinned according to the likeness of the transgression of Adam. Here it is, who was a type of him who was to come. So, he's told us that when Adam was in the garden, when he sinned, death was the result. But not only death to him, death spread to all men. Every single human being dies. And not only that, death spread beyond human beings. The animals die. The trees die. Everything dies because of one man's sin. You say, that's not fair. Well, that's how God is working. So, death spread to all men. And then it says this, all sin, because all sin with Adam. Adam's sin was imputed to every human being. You're like, that's not fair. And then he says, even over those who hadn't sinned in the likeness of the transgression of Adam. In other words, Adam got a command, he disobeyed. But death, the evidence, the effect of sin is even over those who never received the command and had the opportunity to disobey, like infants in the womb. You say that's not fair. Well, first of all, let me say this. You don't want fair. You want grace. That's what you want. I don't want fair. You don't want fair. No one wants fair. We want grace. We want a free gift of God that we do not deserve. We want mercy. That's what we want. See, many times we say, oh, that's not fair because Adam sinned. But let me ask you this. If you were the first created man or woman, if you were the first one, would you have done better than Adam? Would you have done better than Eve? They probably made it in the garden a lot longer than I would have. But anyway, let's go back to this. Because in the text it says, who is a type of him who was to come? So let me give you a scenario here. Let's say you have some kids in the classroom and one kid is misbehaving. And because of that one kid's misbehavior, the whole class misses recess. You say that's not fair. Well, let me ask you this. Let's say you have a class and every single person except one is misbehaving. But because of that one that is not misbehaving, the whole class gets recess. Is that fair? See, we've been talking about justification or being declared righteous by the work of Christ for a few months now. Have you ever said that's not fair? See, oftentimes it is disguised as, oh, we're concerned with what's fair, and we're really concerned with what benefits us. We're like Adam sinning and me suffering the consequences because I sinned in him. That's not fair because it doesn't benefit me. But when Christ came and he lived the righteous life I could not live, and that's put on my account, oh, that's fine. See, we're inclined to what benefits us. So, to be consistent, if you're going to say what Adam did and you being punished is not fair, you have to say it's not fair for Christ, for what he did, for you to get his righteousness. So, see, we don't want what is fair. Because if we get what is fair, we don't get the righteousness of Christ and we go to hell. Forget about Adam's sin. What about your sin? What about my sin? So you see, we want grace, and Adam was a type of him who was to come. Now, in future devotionals, we'll go more into this, but how is Adam a type of him who was to come? Well, we've already referenced it. Adam disobeyed God. And when he disobeyed God, the consequence for that was death. And death not only came to him, but death spread to all humanity. And not only that, but sin spread to all humanity. And as David says, in iniquity I was brought forth, in sin my mother conceived me. When the sperm meets the egg and conceives in the womb, it conceives a sinner who has sinned in Adam. That's what happens when you are, or you remain in the line of Adam. You only have one future, and that is judgment. That is condemnation, because you are a sinner. Now, how is he a type of Christ? Well, Christ came, and by, as we'll see later, Christ's work, by this one man's obedience, he obeyed God where Adam fell. Because of his obedience, the reward for his obedience and his righteousness spreads to all, listen, that are in the line of Christ. See, we're born into this world in the line of Adam. But if we put our faith in Christ and we deny ourselves, we take up our cross to follow him, we lose our life for his sake, and we come under his lordship by faith, then what Christ did, his obedience, is put on our account. And we are treated as righteous, as perfectly righteous, because we are treated as Christ. And we are treated as sons of God. When Christ is the only begotten Son, we are treated as sons of God, and we do become sons of God, sons and daughters of God. And we receive the reward that Christ deserves. You see how Adam was a type of Christ? So therefore, let me say it again. You don't want fair. I don't want fair. We want grace.